Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today, and happy Memorial Day. Today is a day that we remember all of those brave men and women who gave up their lives so we can enjoy our freedoms. We don't have to like the government, but we have to respect what those brave men and women did. Today's upload is going to be full of a lot of very interesting stuff, and today's upload is dedicated to all of those brave men and women who gave their lives for our freedoms. So before we get into it, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It doesn't cost a cent. Click the like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. And folks, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to today's upload, shall we? All right, folks. So today's upload, I want to touch on a few things. I want to look at some very unusual media government cover-up attacks. There hasn't been one in quite some time, actually, that is really noticeable. Maybe the young boy up in Canada, but the strangeness of it all, back in 2020, 2021, 2022, when it was a hotbed for attacks, and the media and government just really did their best to cover it up and to slanderize the victims. Also, I want to go a little deeper into the USS Nimitz investigation. I talked a little bit about, periodically, I talk about Jonathan Axlerod and what his family endured after the investigation. I want to go a little bit deeper into that today, and I got some encounters that I'd like to share. I also have those case files that we have been looking into, the reptilian case files. We've been talking about those for a couple weeks now, in association with D.U.M.b.s, the Deep Underground Military Base, or D.U.M.B., that is located in the Archuleta Mesa in New Mexico. So let's get into today's upload. All right, guys, something that clicked while looking into the war at D.U.M.b.s and the kind of paranormal, anomalous activity that surrounds that area. In other areas like D.U.M.b.s, when looking into Nightmare Hall, unfortunately, there is not a lot of information about Nightmare Hall. Very limited information. I don't know if that was purposely done. I don't know if Phil Schneider, Castiello, Bill Cooper purposely didn't share a lot of that information with the public, thinking that if we were to know the magnitude of the genetic experimentation and manipulation, the public probably would really not deal well with that information. But, you know, just what you hear. Tom Castiello talks about a large bipedal hairy hominid with large hands with claws at the end that is able to mimic a child crying. Strange, alien-like, spindly legged and armed creatures. Really started to make me think about the connection. And then I started to think about, okay, well, Native Americans talked about the Skinwalker, the Navajo talked about the Skinwalker, the Ojibwe, the Bear Walker, Algonquin, and other First Nation tribes have the lore of the Wendigo and other shape-shifting entities, which I think I'm really starting to believe that the reptilian Tarians, what they have been called, the native Tarians to Earth, may have taught humanity this black magic, this darkness. Therefore, I started to think that a lot of these reptilians that were here are demons. And then I start to look at other things and read some other great books and such. And that puts it more into perspective. Jonathan Axlerod's family, the things that they had gone through after Axlerod and his two companions, all in naval intelligence. Ironically enough, Bill Cooper was in naval intelligence. Castiello, no. Schneider, no. But all had clearances. I'm wondering how long these men will walk the earth, you know, after spilling the beans, so to say. But the connection is real, you know, because after Axlerod and his companions investigated the Nimitz Tic Tac, they went to Skinwalker Ranch back in 2009, invited by the Bigelow Aerospace program. And after coming home, kind of shit hit the fan for all the families. Jim Costigan experienced at Skinwalker Ranch, what he experienced at Skinwalker Ranch, life at his home in suburban Maryland had returned to normal. Then on a balmy September evening, Costigan, his wife Layla, and their dog left for a walk at 10 p.m. on their nightly 2-mile walk. It was slightly humid, quite warm, but all three were enjoying their leisurely stroll. It was late enough that most of the neighbors were indoors, "What the heck is that?" murmured Layla as she stopped walking and was fixated on something she had seen over her husband's shoulder. He turned to look and took a sharp breath. 20 yards away, a blue orb was moving in their direction. It was no more than 6 feet off the ground, bright blue, softball-sized, and completely silent. Without warning, it accelerated and quickly shot between them, barely grazing Layla's shoulder as it passed. She did not feel the fast-moving object, but Costigan was certain it was no more than an inch from her shoulder. The orb continued in a straight line and within seconds was lost behind their home. Their dog appeared to have not noticed the orb. They looked at each other. Nothing stirred in the sleepy neighborhood. Costigan swallowed hard and asked her if she was okay. She nodded without speaking, apparently distracted. They then walked home. Layla had heard some of the experiences from Skinwalker Ranch, but he had never described anything in detail to her. Costigan felt a deep sense of unease as the couple prepared for bed. The Costigans had owned their home for several years and had never experienced anything out of the ordinary, either inside or in their neighborhood before his visit to Skinwalker Ranch. Costigan's friend and colleague, Jonathan Axlerod, who had visited the ranch at the same time, had recently begun telling Costigan about some bizarre events happening at his home. Axlerod was adamant that their trip to Skinwalker Ranch had unleashed a paranormal firestorm. This fact made Costigan doubly uneasy. He and Layla slept late that day following the blue orb encounter. When she got up, Layla observed that her body hurt. She had a headache and experienced flu symptoms. It was given in the family that a superbly athletic and very fit Layla simply never got sick. Costigan left for work, promising to check on his wife later in the day, but he couldn't reach her when he called. When he got home, he found her lying listlessly in bed with no energy and a severe headache. In the days that followed, Layla called in sick and took medicine, but her symptoms persist. A week later, she went to the doctor. Multiple tests were run. Several vials of blood were taken. She remained lethargic, her joints increasingly painful. She regularly complained of feeling unwell. 2 weeks later, the tests were back. At the meeting with her primary physician, Costigan could tell that the doctor was at a loss to explain what happened. After dozens of additional doctor visits, including neurologists, immunologists, and other specialists, Layla's bizarre symptoms were eventually diagnosed. She was diagnosed with Hashimoto thyroiditis, an autoimmune disease in which the immune system attacks the thyroid gland. His wife has been on medication ever since. Costigan is adamant that the development of her autoimmune disease was a direct consequence of her close encounter with that blue orb. So I automatically, after reading that, started to think about other researchers that I was friends with who had passed. Claudia Ackley. She's a couple years younger than me. And when I first met her, she was vibrant, not sickly. After years of fighting with the California state government about a lawsuit stating that Bigfoot exists, and she wanted no money. This lawsuit was not about money at all. She just wanted them to say, hey, Bigfoot exists. Myself and my 2 daughters were hiking and we saw these creatures. Tell us they exist so people will know and can be careful. And she just became sicker and sicker and sicker until she finally passed, which is a sad, sad day for me. Just a really beautiful, beautiful person. And the couple of years that I got to know her very well through, I was actually introduced to her by Donald Coleman Jr. Was just amazing. But I could tell from all the things she had experienced, I believe was what made her sick. Then you have Scott Carpenter, out of the blue, had an aneurysm and died. I didn't know Scott. I knew of him. Obviously, I knew his work. People talk about his walking through the woods with a trail cam or a camera facing the back. But coincidence? No, I don't think there are coincidences like that. Few others that I know of. Kirk Stokes, another one who was very sick after researching. Brenton Swanley or Swanton or whatever. I don't know. I don't know him. I know of him via Kirk Stokes. I know that people have a lot of respect for his research, but the majority of his research was actually Kirk Stokes, and not many people know that. Big reason why Kirk Stokes stepped out of the field for so long was because of him. But he was still a researcher and died very quickly. And I'm wondering if the connection is there. And I really do think it is. And then, obviously, the Axlerod, Jonathan Axlerod and his family are the poster children for the eruption of the anomalies in their home following the trips to Skinwalker Ranch. For more than a dozen years following his July 2009 trip and other trips to the ranch, Axelrod's wife and then teenage children were subjected to nightmarish dogmen appearing in their backyard. So that's another thing that I wanted to point out is 2009, 10, and 11 is when they saw these creatures for the first time. That was well before people were even talking about dogmen. And there are, documented reports of this family seeing these. And I'm not saying that it makes it more believable that it's a family of a naval intelligence who investigated the Nimitz Tic Tac, because I would probably believe anyone's experience as long as I could talk to them and feel it out. You know what I mean. But what makes it that much more believable is that it's documented prior to the eruption of dogmen sightings. And they explain, the kids talk about it just like we're talking about our experiences now. I had my experience in 94, well before 2009, and people have seen these things, but it's interesting that everyone that investigated this and then were invited to the ranch via Bigelow all had some really crazy stuff happen. Appearing in their, Teenage children were subjected to nightmarish dogmen appearing in their backyard, to blue, red, yellow, and white orbs routinely flying through the home and in the yard, to black shadow people standing over their beds when they awoke, and the relentless barrage of loud, unexplained footsteps walking up and down the stairs of their home. What was once a normal middle-class home in suburban Virginia became an inferno of bizarre, unexplained phenomena. And Axlerod and his family were certain that the trigger for this transformation was his first trip to the Skinwalker Ranch. It is indeed lucky that the Axlerod family was and is extremely stable, psychologically well-adjusted and grounded, and prone to matter-of-the-fact reactions to these events. In vivid contrast to the reaction of the Axlerod family is the reaction of Juliet Witt and then her roommate to an intense day visit to Skinwalker Ranch. In 2009, the sudden eruption of poltergeist activity, during which 2 bottles of wine were flung across the room, ceiling fans would turn on, TVs would turn on and off on their own, lights going off or flickering, books showing up piled at the base of the stairs, clothing moved and laid out on the daughter's bedroom floor with no one else in the home. And it still continues to this day. And that was 2009. So now we are talking 26 years, 25 years. 26? 25. The paranormal intrusion into the Witt's home originally caused severe emotional reaction. Her roommate and provoked the young man to leave the home. This emotional outcome of the ranch transmission event, a warning to other military personnel who contemplated spending time there. Health effects. So we just talked about his wife, Jim Costigan. But health effects of bringing something home were immediately apparent when Costigan's wife experienced a close encounter with the blue orb, diagnosed with Hashimoto thyroiditis, an autoimmune disease. Axelrod's family also suffered health effects. His wife had systematic lupus and Raynaud's disease. Both Axelrod's teenagers suffered from intense flu-like symptoms at different times following anomalies in their home, with the most serious medical symptoms occurring to the younger teenage boy after being attacked in the middle of the night in 2011, February 7th, by blue and red orbs. Without breaking medical confidentiality in the HIPAA, it can be unequivocally stated that a large number of people who brought something home from Skinwalker Ranch also began to experience autoimmune disease in one or more family home. This autoimmune disease includes Graves, Serjona's syndrome, Hashimoto, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus. Because medical confidentiality and the need to observe HIPAA requirements. Secondly, because the numbers are too low to evaluate cause and effect significance, there will be no more discussion of the autoimmune effects on these families. So you have all of this other, on top of seeing dogmen and having shadow men in your home, having footsteps just up and down your stairs while you sleep. Mrs. Axelrod got out of bed one day and stood on the landing because she just kept hearing the footsteps but saw nothing. And it just continued. You know, I really believe that it is all connected, all of it. One last bit of information that I want to share, and I found this very interesting, just because of where Skinwalker Ranch is in Utah, and we all know the Mormons, and I don't really know if the Mormons are Latter-day Saints or if Latter-day Saints are Mormons, but I know they're both in Utah. I don't know much about them, but this is very interesting. So during that summer of Axlerod and Costigan and the other fellow, and other apprentices or other associates or whatever you want to call them, being at Skinwalker Ranch in 2009, this happens. Beginning in the summer of 2009, a team comprising of 6 investigators, 3 scientists, 2 technicians, alternated 1 to 2 week missions to interview residents as well as to deploy sensor instrumentation at Skinwalker Ranch. So this is during the same time of Axlerod, Costigan, and his other friend, other naval intelligence gentleman. I forgot his name off the top of my head, but there's now another investigation looking at Skinwalker Ranch and the anomalies going on there. That these people that are there are now going to interview the people in the surrounding area of the ranch. By March 10th, approximately 30 residents who had reported firsthand encounters were interviewed in their homes. The group comprised of lifelong residents of the area, all living within a 1 to 2 mile radius of Skinwalker Ranch. This included 4 local police officers, 11 Ute tribesmen, including a shaman, 12 ranchers, 6 business owners, and the director of the local Fish and Wildlife Office. Half were members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. 11 of the individuals recounted firsthand encounters with a dog or wolf-like creature that could run at speed on 2 legs, sometimes in conjunction with orb activity. Its estimated height 6 to 7 feet. Many reported observations taking place during daytime hours. Some sightings were very recent, only a month or 2 old, while others had taken place years ago. All observations had occurred within a 5 mile radius of the ranch. So people that lived 1 to 2 miles from the ranch were interviewed. And even at 5 miles from the ranch, they had seen some sort of dog-like man creature. And I find it interesting that the 11 Ute tribesmen, including a shaman, because if you look up the Ute Navajo Wars, you will understand that the Yenadalushi, the Skinwalker, was technically a soldier, a covert soldier. Young tribesmen would put the hide of a coyote or a deer and go into the Ute village and attack at night covertly and come out of the village into the desert. And that's all they saw. That's all these Utes would see after realizing, hey, their village had just gotten attacked. Holy crap, that's a bipedal coyote-looking thing? Deer thing? Look it up. It's real. I'm not making that up. But 5 miles within, and then you have these folks seeing it as well. From the details provided in the interviews about the bipedal creature, there was a migration route of these creatures. Whether these extraordinary frequent bipedal dog-like creatures overlap with local skinwalker lore, it is not known. Frequent sightings of blue, white, yellow orbs flying low to the ground were also reported. The interview transcripts were carefully examined by independent analysis to identify confabulation from both witness and investigators, and only cases that were interviewed by multiple investigators and cross-referenced multiple witnesses were reported out to the DIA because of the safeguards later claims by a couple of retired ranch security guards that they had confabulated reports in order to earn the approval of superiors could be rebutted and dismissed. Some neighbors had also witnessed unidentified flying objects, including triangular, cigar, and disc-shaped. This is creepy too. And anomalous tracks, including 2 sets of barefoot human tracks merging into one. The second set of barefoot tracks in the snow that approached a 5-foot-tall barbed wire fence and continued in the snow after the fence with no evidence of broken stride, no evidence of either climbing the barbed wire fence or jumping over the wire. And they've obtained a variety of hair samples, and these hair samples were subject to DNA analysis and inconclusive results, very similar to what my results were in Meeker, Colorado. Only one notable species came, and it was Corcuta corcuta, which would be hyena. The other were unidentified. So, to me, what this tells me, or what this makes me think, is that there is a D.U.M.B. under Skinwalker Ranch. There is a deep underground military base. Maybe not right under the ranch itself, but somewhere within a 5-mile radius of that ranch, there is a deep underground military base. The proof is in the pudding. You guys are just as fascinated in this stuff as I am, the majority of you. And you will see what I'm talking about. You can see it. It's right there. The evidence is clear as day. Paranormal stuff just doesn't happen. You know, there's always a result or a cause. You know, my home was part of the Underground Railroad. The oldest part of my house that I live in is just outside of this studio room. And the initial part of the house is very small. But the basement is huge. And the basement is just as old as the original part of the house back in the early 1800s. But it extends far out this, you know, like, so the house sat like this. It was just very small, but the basement went out like that and out like that, just deep, right under the ground, which I guess was rare. And then there's a sub-basement, which is another rarity for upstate New York. So anyway, there is, in my mind and in my own personal opinion, the government knows what's going on. They will never say it. They don't care to say it, but the proof is in the pudding. Something. And I bet you Dulce has that same kind of vibe on the Archuleta Mesa, which I do believe I've read about. So it really only makes sense. People are like, well, I wonder why Skinwalker Ranch is so haunted. Well, when you've got a deep underground military base in the surrounding area that are conducting experiments, maybe not with just genetic mutation and experimentation, but also with portals, with atom kind of combustion and manipulations, like the Hadron Collider. I'm sure there's a lot of weird shit that goes on in the surrounding area where the Hadron Collider is. So with that, let's jump into the next part of the upload. So the next piece I was going to do was I was going to talk about this. That, my friends, is 3 years of compiled investigations on attacks like Dr. Nancy Shaw, Brenda Hamilton, Christopher Whiteley, Amber Miller, Tony Ahrens, Corey Godsey, the gentleman in Oregon just last year, the Brazilian case, and not the brain suckers, the actual Dogman that attacked a small village. I was going to talk about that, but I kind of got put off because of the stuff that I just talked about. So I want to get into some encounters. I'll put together an upload very soon about some of these encounters. But I know that I'm onto something because after Sean Atwood had talked with me, he wanted to interview me about my research into these attacks. And when you have strange attacks and there's a scapegoat, a human scapegoat on an animal attack, or the government / media, because they are connected. I mean, I think it's like 90% of the media's funding comes from big government, big pharma, military industrial complex. Sean wanted me to talk about it. And yeah, there's a lot of, how do you discredit a dead victim and make them out like the villain when they're dead? Why talk about their addiction? Why talk about their past? Well, I'll tell you why. Because when they do that, instead of Bill and Sarah sitting at their kitchen table in the morning eating their cornflakes, reading the news or listening to the news and hearing Amber Miller and Tony Ahrens were attacked here, not thinking about how strange two people were attacked 2 months apart at the same location and both torn apart savagely, like literally ripped limb from limb, or Dr. Nancy Shaw's car parked on one side of the road, her car idling, door open, she's on the other side of the road torn apart, or Brenda Hamilton being torn apart in a culvert tunnel there, just laying in the ditch with another kind of rodent-like animal ripped apart. Instead of talking about those folks in a good manner, minus Brenda Hamilton and Nancy Shaw, because they really couldn't do it with those folks, but with Tony Ahrens, Amber Miller, Christopher Whiteley, and many others, they love to bring up that they had a criminal background, robbery usually, drug addiction, alcoholism. Amber Miller was a piss poor mom because her dad was a cop and he was killed in the line of duty. Amber Miller's mom was a bad mom. Why bring that up? Why villainize the victim? Well, because Sarah and Bill, or whoever they are, at their kitchen table can be like, well, you know what? Serves them right. They're just drug addict losers anyway. Right, Sarah? Yeah. That's why they do it. So I'll do an upload on that a little bit later. Maybe this week. I got a couple of interviews. I'm going to be interviewing DJ today, and have that out tomorrow. Another gentleman from Tennessee, and a couple other folks this week. So let's get into a quick encounter, and then I want to talk about those case files. The case files that center around Dulce. Today's first encounter, I shared this Saturday Nightmares live from New York. I shared this experience on Saturday. And, to be honest with you, laying down after the live stream at 4:10 in the morning, I was actually thinking about this encounter and how much it freaked me out. I was 12 years old at the time. My aunt had cancer, and my mom, brother, and I went to stay with them. They lived on a small farm in a very secluded part of Mississippi. During the day, we didn't want to be in the house. My younger cousins didn't like seeing their mom while she did her treatments. So we would go and play in the woods or ride the horses. We were there for about 4 days. On the second day, my uncle came home. He worked on a boat and ran outside, grabbing us and locking us in the room in the house. His reason for this is there is something killing the animals in the woods. Could be a big cat or a bear, but I'm going to kill it. He wasn't the most stable man ever and eventually ended up taking his own life 4 years later. While we were all trapped in the house that night, he was out in the woods. We could hear the animals on the farm making a racket. This wasn't normal happy animal noises. My mom was in the room with my aunt, and they were watching a movie. We went into the hallway and could hear her room to tell they were scared as we were. Screams and prayers were flying out of that room. Apparently, my mom and aunt and my cousin saw something at the foot of the bed trying to grab my aunt. They described it as gray with long fingers and a large mouth. When this happened, I ran to the home phone and called my dad, who was in Shanghai at the time. I was so scared and all the adults were screaming, I looked out the window in the back room to see if anyone was on the farm. All I saw were both horses and the 2 dogs lying down. They were all spread out and the dogs were close to the porch by the bedroom, which made no sense. They were on a chain closer to the doghouse than the house, but I knew the chain could not reach the porch, or at least where I saw the dogs. I could have sworn I saw my uncle in the distance, and being a young lad who was very scared of what was going on, I ran outside, stumbling off the porch. I saw both dogs lying there. They looked like they had been sleeping from afar, but up close I knew they were dead. They looked like they had been crushed. These were big farm dogs. They helped herd cattle. Dog's face and body were wet, and the chain looked like it had been snapped. My cousin ran out after me and told me we had to go to the barn because she thought she had also seen her dad. We ran to the barn where the horses were supposedly to be, and we got there, and one of them was very obviously dead. Its head and neck were hardly recognizable. The other horse was close to dying. I'll be honest, it looked like a giant bear had come in and attacked them. We climbed up to the second story of the barn and decided that we were going to take a look out the window into the woods to see if we could see her dad, since we both saw him earlier. We were up there for maybe 5 minutes or so when we saw what I can only describe as a very long-legged, long-torsoed dog running into the field in front of us, almost like a deer figure. We saw her dad walking to the house and we followed. We screamed at him, but he ignored us. We told him about the animals, but he had already known this. He was very dirty and had to shoot a cow that night. We got into the house and everyone was sitting in the dining room, screaming about what had happened. Me and my cousin kept quiet until my aunt said it was a demon or a skinless man. I told her that it looked like a long-legged dog, and she told me that it was going to come and get me in the house. I was really scared, and my mom and her got into a huge fight about that. We were told it was a wolf and or a bear that killed the animals, and we could not go outside at night anymore. My uncle would lock the barn door from the inside and sleep in there every night. We all slept in one part of the house, and since then I have not been able to talk about this to my aunt or cousin. My uncle killed himself, and they ended up living with us for a year and a few months. During that time, my cousin would strangle me in my sleep and physically abuse my animals. We kicked them out, but she would write me letters about what happened, and I am still on edge about it. So the mom and the aunt and the cousin see a grayish humanoid with large hands and large clawed hands. And this young person and his cousin see something completely different, but the only thing that's the same is it was hairless and gray. Spindly as well. To me, that it sounds like a crawler. It sounds like a Dogman. It sounds like a genetic experimentation. I really honestly, and then we have this. We all know what happened in Hopkinsville. Well, in Hopkinsville, back in what I believe the 50s. So the connection that I want to talk about right here, the Kelly or Hopkinsville encounter took place on August 21st, 1955 at a farmhouse of a Sutton family located between Kelly and Hopkinsville, Kentucky. That night, Elmer Lucky Sutton and John Charlie, or J.C. Sutton, were hosting guests along with their wives and children. With a total of 8 adults and 3 children in the house, attention was easily divided between different conversations, paying no attention to the family friend, Billy Ray Taylor, as he left the house to fetch drinking water from the well. Taylor described seeing the stereotypical flying saucer streak across the sky as he retrieved the water from the well before the UFO landed a little over a half a mile away. He recounted the experience to the rest of the house upon returning, but was met with laughter and ridicule. The incident was shrugged off as an overreaction by Tyler, and the occupants returned to their game of cards and chatting. A little over an hour later, the Sutton's dog began to bark frantically, rousing Lucky and Billy Ray to investigate. Walking outside towards the dog's location, the dog quickly sprinted past them as a motion began stirring in the trees surrounding the farmhouse. Unable to identify the emerging figures at first, Lucky and Billy Ray ran back to the house, quickly arming themselves before returning to the scene, prepared to fend off the homestead from thieves and wild animals. Retrieving a pistol and a shotgun, the 2 men returned outside to confront the figures, as the rest of the house watched in disbelief. As the men stepped out onto the porch, they finally saw what had emerged from the forest. Little gray men. No taller than 3 feet in stature, these humanoid-like figures slinked toward the men, their grotesquely over-thin, long limbs dragging and swaying as they approached. Their glowing yellow eyes seemed almost to glaze over, paying no attention to the men through the vision, as their bulbous heads bobbed under their own weight. Tyler also described the figures as having bat-like ears that pointed instantly in the direction of any sound being made. Without hesitation, Lucky Sutton shot the humanoid at point-blank range with his shotgun. As the shot collided with the figure, a metallic ping was heard, and the figures were knocked down to the ground before abruptly standing right back up and running off with other figures. A few minutes later passed after the men retreated into the house and the occupants were obviously shaken. Over the next 30 minutes, these figures would reappear and disappear. peering in through the windows and scratching their claws against the panes of glass as if purposely intimidating the lodgers. Firing a reaction shot at one of the approaching figures, Lucky and Tyler, again, ran outside to see if they had done any damage, this time only to be ambushed by one of the creatures standing on the overhang of the roof. The creature grabbed Billy Ray Tyler by the top of his head before he was pulled back inside. Following this surprise attack, the men spent the next 4 hours fending off 15 of these creatures as they stalked around the house, peering into the doorway and the windows, looking for an opportunity to get inside. After managing to hold them off with gunfire, the family went to the Hopkins police station. Once day arrived, informing the police of the siege they had just underwent. Known as trustworthy folk, the police had no reason to hold them at disbelief, since the Suttons, especially since the adults, or disbelief toward the Suttons, especially since the adults were sober and the children recounted the same story. Upon investigation of the Sutton farmhouse, there was little evidence of any creature. And then, of course, as time went on, years went on, people started to say, well, this was the great horned owl. 15 great horned owls attacked a home at night, grabbing someone by the top of their head. I'm sorry, they're big, but a great horned owl isn't going to yoke a big dude up by his head, especially in 1955. It just doesn't make any sense to me, you know what I mean? Like, I can just picture Billy Ray Tyler in his overalls weighing 260 pounds with some, moonshine gut, Ain't no great horned owl going to pick Billy Ray Tyler up. Anyway, the connection is this, which is very interesting. Hopkinsville, Kentucky. Nadine Smith and her husband and their son Shane moved into the trailer court as they waited for housing on their base. Nadine's husband was in the military and they moved around a lot. One day, Nadine and Shane were out playing in the yard when they found a dead dog. They quickly determined that it was the neighbor's dog. The neighbors were not around, so they ended up burying the pooch in the woods by the tree line. The next day, they went out to check on the grave, and the animal had been dug up and was now gone. Soon after, Nadine began seeing a creature out by the tree line. It had blood-red eyes and stood, she guessed, 8 feet in height. It appeared to be a bipedal animal of some sort. She began seeing it quite frequently. Her husband assumed that she was exaggerating, but 2 or 3 weeks later, he saw it as well. He saw the red eyes and also heard it grunting and groaning. He went outside with his shotgun to confront it, but the creature was gone. Nadine decided to ask neighbors around the park if they had seen anything weird in the area. Her neighbors seemed uninterested in speaking to her about it, and a few of them even shunned her family entirely. As she walked around the trailer park one day, she spotted inside an abandoned trailer red eyes staring at her from the window. Whatever it was that was inside that trailer around this time, Shane began having reoccurring nightmares that he would wake in a panic. He claimed the creature was looking at him through the window at night. They would attempt to calm him down by telling him that it was just a nightmare and nothing more. One night, they ran into the room during one of these night terror incidents, and both Nadine and her husband saw the red-eyed creature in the window looking in. Nadine described it as being an upright walking wolf. She decided to do some research and found out about Skinwalkers and Dogmen and came to believe that the creature may be one of these. While her husband was away at work, Nadine, too scared to stay home alone, asked a friend to stay over. One night during this time, they heard grunting, guttural growls coming from outside as well as noises. other noises, both women looked out the door and observed the upright walking black wolf with red eyes looking at them. Nadine noted that it appeared very angry and bolted in their direction. They went inside very quickly. Just then, their 14x8 trailer began to shake violently. As they were preparing to call the police, everything stopped. They opened the door and the creature was now gone. Nadine and her husband decided that it was probably best just to move on, and they packed their things and drove off. They were in such haste to get away from the area, they ended up leaving some of their furniture behind. Nadine's husband claims that even to the last day, while packing the car, he could see the red eyes watching him from the tree line. So the connection being some 60 years later, after having a UFO and some strange attack with a bunch of alien-like creatures, now you've got Dogman. Coincidence? I don't think so. I really don't. With that, guys, I am going to end this upload. I am kind of exhausted. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. I hope you all enjoyed this upload as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I like to talk about this stuff. I like to share this information that I find. And guys, I cannot say it enough. I cannot say it enough. Get this book. This book is Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. I've read this book 3 times, cover to cover, or cover to end, or whatever as you say it. But it is thoroughly entertaining. The amount of information that is there is just like, holy shit. Wow. Just a great book. And a lot of information. And with that, thank you once again for supporting the channel. It is your support, after all, that helps the channel to continue to grow and go. And honestly, what gives people a place to share their experiences and theories, judgment and ridicule free. Just treated with the respect we all deserve. Thank you. Stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, friends. These creatures are real. They are out there and dangerous. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for that truth, and God bless.